Okay, it's after 8 o'clock. We're going to start. Tonight's class is sponsored by David and Yael Galub. Tonight is their 30th wedding anniversary. So they are sponsoring the class tonight. They should have Arichas Yavim V'Shanim Tevis together, 120.
Oh, man, happy anniversary.
Hatzlacha, Gezon, Parnasa, Nachas, all good things. Okay, tonight's Halach and Tanya. So tonight we're going to learn the halachis, is interesting, of the Hafta Re'acha Kamecha. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to love another Jew. And as Rabbi Kiva said, that's Klal Gadol B'Torah, that is the golden rule. Hillel, when the non-Jew came to convert, and he said to Hillel, teach me, I'll convert on the condition you teach me the Torah on 1 foot. So Hillel answered him, don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you. And he said, Hillel said even more than Rabbi Kiva, Hillel said, that is the entire Torah, and everything else is the explanation of it. So when we get to Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya, we'll discuss it in much greater length according to Chassidus. But to understand the mitzvah, in the halacha aspect of it, there's a few issues over here. Number one, there's a famous question that the Mizritcha Maggid asks, and there's two mitzvahs. There's one mitzvah, which is a halacha mitzvah, to love Hashem, and there's a halacha mitzvah, you have to re'acha kamecha, that you have to love your friend. So the Maggid asks the famous question, I can understand, I can tell you to do or not to do, even though you hate it. I can tell you to eat a certain food, even though you hate it. I can command you to eat matzah. Even though you hate it, I can still command you to do it because you can still do it even though you hate it. I can command you don't eat pig, even though you love it, but I can command you in an action you can command. There's a halachic question though, how in the world is it possible for somebody to command somebody on a feeling? You either love it or you don't. So how is it about it? I can't tell you love broccoli. I can say eat broccoli if it's kosher. I can't tell you love broccoli. How can I command you as a mitzvah, as a halacha, to love something which is it's a feeling? It's not something you can turn on a button. So the Maggid answers, this is very relevant, by the way, in the halachic aspect, besides the Chassidic aspect of it. And the Maggid explains the mitzvah is not to love. The mitzvah is to bring you to those things that will bring you to love, which means Hashem set the human being up in a way that intellect stimulates feelings. It's called Seichel Meled Midas, like we learned in Tanya in the 3rd chapter. The parents are Chochma Bina, and they create children which are the emotions of love and fear. Bottom line is that Hashem says, when you meditate, I don't want to get into the mitzvah of loving Hashem, but bottom line is, when you have Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and you meditate into the greatness of Hashem, so the Maggid says, v'yohavta doesn't mean you should love as a mitzvah. V'yohavta means you will love. V'yohavta is a commandment. It's also a statement that you will in the future. V'yohavta can mean you should love Hashem, and it can mean you will love Hashem. So the Maggid explains, Mizritcha Maggid explains that the mitzvah is to meditate into those things of godliness that will bring you to v'yohavta. How does that work with the mitzvah of loving another Jew? There's a mitzvah in the Torah to love another Jew. And by the way, there's a lot of offshoot halachis of this mitzvah, v'yohavta re'acha kamecha. For instance, the Rambam writes, and Shulchan brings us down, that the mitzvah of visiting the sick, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah mitzvah to visit the sick. Yeah, it says Hashem came to visit Avraham Avinu, but that's a story. There's nowhere in the Torah where it says you have to visit the sick, or you have to comfort the mourners, or you have to, all these bein adam l'chaveira mitzvahs between burying the dead, all those things. There's no mitzvah in the Torah to do these things. And the Rambam says in halacha that these are all parts of the mitzvah v'yohavta l'reacha kamecha. Just like you want, if you're sick, God forbid, you want somebody to visit you. God forbid, if you're sitting shiva, you want somebody to pay a shiva call, a condolence call. So therefore, this is all halachically. This is part of the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha. Amongst other things, for instance, let me talk already the halacha of it. For instance, it says to participate in somebody's happy occasion as if it would be your own. Somebody's making a wedding. You feel the simcha of your friend. Or like they say, God forbid the opposite in his pain. Or if somebody needs a good advice, to give him good advice. Or something that you can help him with, helping him get healthy. Or whatever it is. That's all part of the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha. Now, how could that be? So the explanation is like this. I'm talking in the halachic now. In Chassidus, it's much deeper. But V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, what can I do to love another Jew? So first of all, in Tanya, briefly, the Alter Rebbe explains that there's two parts of me, the neshama and the body. What separates me from you, and you from her, and you from him, is only the body. The neshama, my neshama, your neshama, their neshama, his neshama, her neshama, is all the same neshama. We are all part of God. So therefore, in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe explains that because the neshama is primary part of the person, the neshama is more important than the body. So once you realize that the neshama is more important than the body, then you will come to the V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, that you'll come to love the other person because you realize that me and him are the same person. Just our bodies are different, but the bodies is only secondary, not the primary. Primary is the neshama. But even from a halachic perspective, putting in a little bit of Kabbalah, it says in Kabbalah, and this explains the understanding of the halacha. It says in Kabbalah that all neshamas of all Jews of all generations were included in the neshama of Adam Arishan. In Adam Arishan were included all the neshamas of all the Jews of all generations, with very few exceptions. Neshama Chadasha, new neshama, like it says, Alter Rebbe's neshama. But generally speaking, every single neshama was included in Adam Arishan. Those neshamas that were part of Adam Arishan's head became neshamas of heads of generations. Those that were hands became hands, feet. I mean, not talking literally, but I'm saying like the heads of the community, the leaders of the community, the hands of the community, the feet of the community, and so on. So all the neshamas were included in Adam Arishan. So therefore, the Chassidic explains in the explanation of this halacha, he says all Jews basically are one big body. We're all one big body. And if we're all one big body, it never happens that when, I always give this analogy, but it's a very simple analogy, which explains it pretty decently. And that is, you can imagine a guy loves to go skiing. And a whole year he's waiting for his vacation to go skiing. The day he's about to leave for skiing, he trips over his own foot. Nobody else caused it. Nobody did it. He did it himself. He tripped over his own foot, and God forbid he broke his foot, and now he's not going to be able to go skiing. Okay? Now he can't go skiing. Do you ever think that this person will start beating up his foot and telling the foot, because of you, I can't go skiing? Then you never heard of such a thing. Why not? Because the foot is me. I'm going to beat up my foot. That's me. So it's explained in the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, and the logic of the mitzvah. How is it possible to love somebody else like you love yourself? And the answer is very simple. Because V'ahavta l'reacha doesn't only mean kamecha, like yourself. V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha means because he is yourself. Kamecha, he is part of you. You're all one body. And therefore, like we explained last week, when somebody does something wrong to you or something wrong, you don't hate the person. That's against the mitzvah of V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha. You hate what they do, but you love the person. And that's the logical explanation how somebody could come to the mitzvah of V'ahavta Re'acha Kamecha, halachically, because you understand that you love the person, but you hate what they do. But the person is all an extension of you. And therefore, you love the person. Now, there's a very interesting question in halacha. When it says, V'ahavta Re'acha Kamecha, does that include a non-Jew or not? And many opinions say it does include a non-Jew also, because they bring psukim that shows that even a non-Jew is called Re'ehu, your friend, and after all, they are a creation of Hashem. So there is a mitzvah to love everybody. Obviously, family comes first, even within Jews itself. Halachically, there's a mitzvah to love your family more than to love other people, because halachically they're closer. And they come first. Family comes first, halachically. But now there's a very interesting question that as a Chabadnik is very difficult to say it, that there are opinions. But does the mitzvah of loving another Jew apply to people that are not religious? They're not religious. They are not reyacha because, they're not, you're not your friend. They're not keeping Torah mitzvahs. Is there a mitzvah to love them or not? So there are opinions, by the way, that say that if the person is not religious and he doesn't want to do tshuva and he's not doing tshuva, you can hate him. There are opinions in Allah like that. We don't hold like that, and most poskim don't hold like that. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, they quote in Halacha, poskim quote the Alter Rebbe of Tanya in Perek Lamed Beis, that the Rebbe always called Perek Lev, the heart of Tanya, which is the mitzvah of loving another Jew. And they explain, the Alter Rebbe said, because they quoted Gemara. The Gemara says, if somebody sees their friend sinning, this is what the Gemara says. Misha mitzvah listenoisei. The Gemara says like this: if you see a friend of yours sinning, it's a mitzvah to hate him and to tell your friends to hate him. So the Alter Rebbe quotes that Gemara, and he says that only refers to a person who is on your level of Yiddishkeit. They're on your level of Yiddishkeit. And they refuse to do tshuva when you admonish them. And even then, the Alter Rebbe says, mitzvah l'sneis, it doesn't mean it's a mitzvah to hate the person. It's a mitzvah to hate what they're doing, at the same time love the person. Especially when today, as we learned many times, they don't really have a din of desecrator of Shabbos or all those types of things, because there was called Tinik Shenishba, which is a child that was captured and kidnapped by the non-Jews in the Cantonist time, and etc. And they were raised as goyim, so they just don't know better. But bottom line is that you have to love every single Jew, no matter who the Jew is. There's a very interesting story that the Rebbe told, that before he became Rebbe, a non-religious Jew once came into 770. And the Rebbe was talking to him for an extended period of time. And afterwards, an older Chassid came over to the Rebbe and told the Rebbe, why are you wasting your time with this non-religious Jew when you could be spending your time with the religious Jews? That's what the Chassid admonished the Rebbe. This is before he became Rebbe. So the Rebbe said he went upstairs in 770 to his father-in-law. He went up to the previous Rebbe, and he told him the story. He told him the story that he was admonished for spending time, so to speak, with this non-religious Jew. And the previous Rebbe said to the Rebbe the following: parents have children. They love all the children equally. But sometimes there's a child with special needs. Special need child. That child, it's mandatory on the parent to love them even more because they need it more. And the Rebbe said the previous Rebbe said to the Rebbe that in the spiritual realm, we're all God's children. People that are not religious yet are sometimes like special needs. So the Rebbe said the previous Rebbe told the Rebbe, on the contrary, those Jews who need more love to bring them closer to Yiddishkeit, on the contrary, the Rebbe told me you did 100% right by spending a lot of time with them, because that's a child that needs special needs, and that child needs special TLC, so to speak, to be able to bring them closer. In fact, there's another interesting story with Rabbi Gordon, Josh Gordon's father, a remarkable story. What? Oliver Shalom. With Josh Gordon, Oliver Shalom's father, Rabbi Shalom Dovrai Gordon, Oliver Shalom. When he became a rabbi in New Jersey, so those in the 50s, the shuls were not religious, basically. Unless we had the Chassidic, but these are people that came after the war. Many of them were not religious, the children weren't religious. And he said to the previous rabbi, he asked him a question. When do I scream at the people for not keeping Shabbos and not keeping kosher? When do I do these things? So the previous Rebbe answered him a phenomenal answer. And the Friedrich Rebbe said to him the following: there's something called a schwitz. A schwitz bad is a sauna. You know, where you go in and it's very, very full of steam. It's very hot. And he says there are different levels in the sauna. You know, there's less heat, and the higher up you go is more heat, and it's more intense and hotter, and it, you know, it affects you more. The custom in the sauna was that they called him the bada, the guy in charge of the bath of the sauna, would actually have a whip. And when the person's body was the highest level, is very intensely hot, they would like whip the body or hit the body with a stick, and that felt so good. It felt great. The people loved it because they felt very good from it. So the previous Rebbe said to Rabbi Gordon like this: if somebody comes to somebody in the street and whips him, it's no good. If you warm him up to Yiddishkeit, and then you warm him up more, and you warm him up more, and you warm him up more, they're going to ask you to whip them. They're going to ask you to scream at them. But until they're warmed up in the sauna, until the Jew is brought closer to Yiddishkeit, he told them, don't do it. Because you don't go whipping a person in the street. They'll call the cops on you. Well, you're definitely they're not gonna be your friend. So that's that halacha of Yahavta Re'acha Kamecha. And there's another din. There's a Yerushalmi that the Rambam quotes, Shulchan Aruch quotes, HaMiskabid b'kolin chaverei ein lechelek le'olam haba. It says, what does Miskabid b'kolin chaverei mean? Even if my friend's not around, I make it in a way that I compare my actions are much better than my friend's actions. The guy's not even there. He doesn't even know about it. But I come along and I'm telling people how much better I am than the other person. In English, it's called a politician. That, you know, you tell everybody how great you are. The Gemara says, unless if the person does tshuva, he has no chelek in olam haba, even if the person's not there. Why? Because it's disgusting making yourself sound greater at the expense of somebody else. So he says, the Gemara Shalmi says, the Rambam brings it down, Shulchan Aruch brings it down, la'alocha, en lechelek le'olam haba, until he does tshuva.
The deal here is that the other person isn't there to defend himself.
No, not only if the person's there, where he's embarrassed by it. We're saying even if the person's not there. Even if the person's not there, so seemingly you're not embarrassing him. Okay? Still, in fact, the Gemara says these are the Rambam brings down, these are one of the 24 things that the Gemara says prevent the person from doing tshuva. Meaning, halacha says everything, you can do tshuva for everything, but there's 24 things that really stop you from doing a proper tshuva. And one of the 24 things in Miskabed B'Klein Chaverim. Okay, so anyway, so coming back over here is like this. Whether the person's religious or not, you have a mitzvah of loving them. And the previous Rebbe said, special needs, you need to love them anymore. Again, what is the mitzvah of Yahavtarecha Kamecha on the practical level? So again, halacha says it means visiting the sick, comforting the mourners, attending somebody's simcha, feeling their pain as if it would be your own. All these types of things, helping somebody else out, doing a favor for somebody. That's all the mitzvah of Yahavtarecha Kamecha. Halacha takes it a step further. It says like this, that if a Jew is more needy than you, physically, spiritually, it doesn't matter. They don't have money. They need physical help, the spiritual help, gashmistic help, whatever. And then the din is that when you have rachmanis on somebody, when you have pity on somebody, that itself awakens a love to the person. Rachmanis awakens love. It's a pasuk. It's a pasuk that brings us out. And the pasuk is Yaakov asher pada es Avraham. Yaakov who redeemed Avraham. And the question is, what does it mean Yaakov redeemed Avraham? Yaakov never redeemed Avraham. So what does the pasuk mean? So it's explained, Yaakov is the attribute of Rachmanis, Tiferes. Avraham is the level of Ahava, love. Sometimes love is buried. The love is there, but it's hidden love. When you have Rachmanis on somebody, when you pity somebody, because they're needy, spiritually or physically, that actually awakens within the person a love of the person. And that's human nature also. We mentioned this many times. Many people, many social workers end up falling in love with some of their clients. Why is that? It's coming from the level of Rachmanus, of pity and mercy, that actually stimulates a level of love. Now, the opposite of the mitzvah, the negative aspect of it is you're not allowed to hate any Jew. The pasuk says, you are not allowed to hate somebody in your heart. And right after that, coming to the next part of this mitzvah, is the mitzvah, you have to admonish your friend. Okay, that's what the pasuk says in Parshas Kadeshim. That means you're not allowed to hate somebody in your heart, which, by the way, it means if I hate you, I might, again, be a politician that openly shows that I love you, but you love him and stab him at the same time. So if you hate somebody in your heart, it's a negative commandment. And then, by the way, that is the prerequisite, by the way, of the next mitzvah. And halacha is of admonishing your friend. Because the prerequisite, and in order to be able to admonish somebody, you can only do it when you love them. If you hate them, the Torah says you cannot admonish. There's another important halacha. And the Gemara says, what's the double expression brought down in halacha? Admonish, you should admonish. What's the double expression? Even 100 times. If I'm admonishing somebody and they're not listening, I have to do it 100 times. By the way, the Mefarshim say 100 times doesn't mean 100 times. It means until when? Until they'll hit you. That's what it says. Until they'll hit you. But again, that has to be a friend, like it says even in Kitzur. That has to be somebody that you're close with, you really love, and you mean admonishing them not because you hate them and you love telling them off, but because you actually love them and you actually want them to better their ways. So then you have to do it. Now, what happens if you know the person's not going to listen to you? You know they're not going to listen. So the whole discussion in halacha, in fact, even in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, this din is mentioned in 3 places, and every time the Alter Rebbe says something else. But the general in Hilchos Yom Kippurim, the Alter Rebbe says, if it's a sin which is explicitly mentioned in the Torah, it makes it clear. like the Torah says, don't eat treif, don't eat pig, and you see somebody eating pig, the halacha is you have to tell them 100 times, even though they're not going to listen to you. You know they're not going to listen. You have a mitzvah to admonish them. If it's a mitzvah that's not explicitly mentioned in the Torah, give you an example. They're eating chicken and milk, which is rabbinic. It's not explicitly in Chum. Now, by the way, biblical mitzvahs that are also not explicit are part of this thing. It's not explicit in the Torah. So if you see somebody eating meat and milk, let's say, then you have to admonish them even 100 times, even if you know they're not going to listen. What happens if it's something not explicitly mentioned in Chumash, then halachically you don't have to tell them if you know that they're not going to listen. That's one answer to the question. Other times it says it's a difference between public and private and all that. But the bottom line is, and by the way, there's another important din, that if it's going to be a chil Hashem, then you have to admonish even anybody in public. There's a Gemara brought down in Rambam and brought down in Shulchan Aruch. And that is, B'makom sheyesh chilul Hashem, any place will become a desecration of Hashem's name publicly, ein cholkin kavod afilu l'rav. You don't respect even a Rav, a Rosh Yeshiva, you don't respect anybody. When it comes to Hashem's respect of not, God forbid, having a chilul Hashem, so then the din is, no matter who the person is, you have to publicly admonish that there shouldn't be a chilul Hashem, that people shouldn't think that you're going to desecrate Hashem's name. Another important din, and we'll learn this din and then we'll go to Tanya, and that is, it's forbidden for a Jew to ask Hashem to punish another person. It's forbidden for a Jew. If somebody did something bad to me, it's forbidden for me to ask Hashem to punish the person. And whoever does it, he gets punished first. Hashem will punish him first. And therefore, if you can go to court and get it done that way, that's the best enemy. That's the way you should do it, and you should what?
Didn't Sarah Imenu ask Hashem to punish what was his name?
Hagar.
No, the king.
No, she didn't. The Malach did. She stopped it.
So so what about Hagar? Did she ask her to punish her or not?
Hashem to kill her. She told Avram to take her out of the house. They don't want bad influence. She never asked anybody to be punished.
So nobody got punished?
No.
But Rabbi, there's so many chapters in Tehillim where David HaMelech is specifically requesting for just awful things to happen to his enemies.
That's a very good question. The difference is, though, David HaMelech, because he was a king, all those enemies had a din of not personally against David HaMelech. He represented Klal Yisrael. He represented the whole Jewish nation. And therefore, according to Allah, they were all mated b'malchus. They all rebelled against the king. And again, it's a chil Hashem when they're going against the king, who's God's, like the Rambam says, God's, the Kohanim and the king is Hashem's representative on earth. Melech and the Shemayim, it has a representative on earth, which is called a Melech. So then it's not a personal thing, it's a chil Hashem. Secondly, if he's mated b'malchus, if he rebels against the king, then anyway, halacha says you have to kill him anyway. The king has an obligation to kill him. But you're right, just between regular people, it's something that should not be done.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's go to Tanya.